a safe launch. So we continued as scheduled. Standard procedure again to just continue to monitor weather all the way down to the last minutes of the count, and we see what happens. So today, unfortunately, we did scrub for weather, but we will attempt again this Saturday on May 30th.
And Dan, Jesse, a couple of things to add on there. Right now we are 11 minutes after the scrub was called. Liquid oxygen and fuel are coming off of the first stage. Hard to tell from the view. It's still a little misty around the tank because there's locks on board. But we're between half and a third of each of the fuel and LOX tanks filled on the first stage. So propellant coming out right per plan. The second stage fuel tank is offloading. That's going slower, but it's also a smaller tank. It doesn't take very long to either load it or to offload it. The other thing that we're working on is the high pressure helium spheres, as well as the nitrogen spheres for the landing leg system. The pressure will be brought down on those, eventually getting it down low enough to where people can re-enter the pad area. So right now the team is preparing, once they get a permission, the SpaceX ingress-egress technician team will come back inside the caution area around the pad, make their way up when conditions are right, open up the hatch and assist the astronauts out of the Dragon. I'd like to point out that for those who are wondering whether or not, having gone through this, putting propellant, pressurization gases on, getting fairly close to launch, whether that has done anything to wear out the Falcon 9 or the Dragon, the answer is no. If you can recall, the Falcon 9's designed for at least 10 flights, and about time we get up to a 10th flight, we'll be doing testing to find that we probably got enough margin to continue keep flying. So this is the very first flight of a new first stage and a new second stage. So we haven't even gotten through the first flight. And in all of our margin calculations, we also take into account the fact that we may scrub a launch. So even today's operation, where we have pressurized and we have stressed the vehicle a little bit, that's taken into account in our design and our qualification testing. The other good thing is that the most stressing part of the flight for the Falcon 9 on the first stage is the re-entry. So we didn't even get through that. So we're sitting here on the pad. It's a fairly straightforward situation and not stressing on the Falcon 9. And on the Dragon spacecraft, with the human rating factors to carry crew, there is enough factors of safety, margins of safety, redundancy, that just having 2 people on board and closing the hatch and even pressurizing the propellant system does not eat into the margins of the vehicle.
Offloads continue nominally, 30% on stage 1
so
launch,
right now everything's continuing to offload.
Cool.
The automatic sequences that we use routinely, both at the launch sites, Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, even Vandenberg Air Force Base, as well as in our Texas test site for first and second stage. Those sequences are running. Propellant is coming off of the vehicle per plan. And we see Bob and Doug up in the Dragon spacecraft, just waiting when we can get up there, open the hatch, and help them egress and come on back down the tower. And the other thought I had, Dan and Jesse, is right now we are coming up on what would have been T0, and I'm wondering 10 minutes from now whether the weather officer would turn around and say, yes, it turned good. You just didn't have a long enough window. We only had 1 second and we needed 10 minutes. So we'll have to ask offline and say, hey, did the weather conditions improve? And one thing I'll tag on to that Dan was mentioning and Jesse was talking about, the launch opportunities. The launch window does move earlier on Saturday a little bit. So it just happened to be Orbital Dynamics said today, if you want to go to the International Space Station and you want to launch northeast, which is the approved trajectory, you have to go right at 4:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. You pick another day, the T0 moves. It's just luck of the draw. We might have been doing this at 8 in the morning when we were getting lightning, or we could have been doing it a few hours from now when conditions may have been acceptable. So in the end, we can all look at Isaac Newton and Johannes Kepler for orbital dynamics telling us when do we launch, and that stuck us right in the middle of a period of bad weather. So there's my science lesson for today, Dan and Jesse.
Appreciate that, John. That helps soften the blow of just moving past that T-0 time. But for anybody, if you're just now tuning in, wondering why Falcon 9 is still sitting there on the pad as we move past that T0, we did have a scrub for weather today, just not able to clear all of those constraints. We keep a very close eye on the weather around the pad and their whole way
Dragon
uphill.
SpaceX for weather.
Right now, Bob and Doug are still inside of
Dragon, go ahead for weather.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you some more words on the scrub rationale. Yeah, so we basically scrubbed three rules that we were violating. All three would have been expected to clear 10 minutes after our T0 time. And those three were natural lightning, the field mills, and the attached anvil.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we copy, Jay. We appreciate that update. We could see some raindrops on the windows, and just figured that whatever it was too close to the launch pad at the time we needed it not to be. So we appreciate that. Understand that everybody's probably a little bit bummed out. It's just part of the deal. Everybody was ready today, and we appreciate that. And the ship was great, and we'll do it again.
Oh, yeah.
Copy all, and yeah, we concur. And appreciate your resilience sitting there in the vehicle for us.
We got the easy job. Nothing better than being prime crew on a new spaceship.
Oh, yeah.
All right, some great words from Bob and Doug. They're feeling good inside Dragon. They'll be ready to go when we make our next attempt on Saturday. Right now, we're just still waiting for all of the fuel to come off the Falcon 9 rocket. After
Stage
that,
1 LOX and fuel roughly 20%, and Stage 2 fuel 36%.
and so that call right there, we're still at a little over 20% on fuel, RP1, and LOX, liquid oxygen on the first stage, and then at about 26% on RP1 on that second stage. So again, it takes about 40 minutes once the process starts, so we should have right around 30 minutes or so until all that fuel's off. And then the crew will get the go to disarm the launch escape system. We'll see that crew access arm swing back into place, and they can begin to egress or get out of the Dragon spacecraft.
And you heard it live, that weather update of what we violated. We were just 10 minutes off, unfortunately, but again, today was an instantaneous launch. And as John explained, it's due to the orbital mechanics and making sure that at the time we launch, it will allow us to get to the space station on time and accurately. So you can see on your right screen, Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. They do still have their visors on and still strapped into their seats. The launch escape system is still armed right now as we are offloading fuel, and will not disarm until prop offload is complete. And this is just to ensure the safety of Bob and Doug and make sure that they can egress safely from the rocket.
And just a reminder, today, just this first attempt, we're going to be right back here looking like on Saturday for attempt number 2. Launch America is not going anywhere. still on the track to get Bob and Doug into space, get this Crew Dragon up to the International Space Station. So it's always good. If you're going to scrub, probably rather scrub for weather than an issue on either Falcon 9 or Dragon. And we weren't tracking any issues with the flight systems throughout our countdown today. Everything passed with leak checks on the hatches and the crew suits. All the communications working great. All the teams were ready to go. So as John and I said, always nice to have a little bit more practice, and we'll be right back at it on Saturday.
What would this launch be if it wasn't even more exciting to try and launch today, and now we have to push it to Saturday?
Really got to build the suspense.
Yes. So.
Hey, Dan and Jesse. Another thought crossed my mind while I'm watching the diagram here showing fuel is just about off. First and second stage, we're down under 10%. LOX is also just about off of first stage.
10%.
Yep, we're getting the announcement.
Fuel's roughly 20%.
Stage 2 fuels at 20%. Stage 1 LOX is under 10%. So just continuing to come off of the vehicle as expected. On the monitor, Bob and Doug continue with visors down. Their launch escape system is armed, as we've mentioned. If there is anything that were happen to go wrong right now, they still have the viable pad abort means, something that we demonstrated way back in 2015 on one of these webcasts when we fired the Dragon capsule using the 8 Super Dracos off of the launch pad and it splashed down offshore in the Atlantic Ocean. So they're staying there with the system armed until all the hazards are essentially removed and we bring the crew access arm around them. We're standing by a minute. We're going to listen to Launch Director talking to the weather officer.
If you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have a scrub because of weather, but as we were saying, we are looking forward to trying this again on Saturday. Our launch time on Saturday will be another instantaneous window, so we'll have to have the weather cooperate again, and that launch time will be at 3:22 p.m. Eastern. I think our last weather update put us at about 40% probability of violation. John, I can check me real quick.
Yeah, Dan, what I saw coming out of the Air Force was 40% probability of violation, I believe. It's always tough because they report in terms of violation, and the optimists have to subtract that from 100% to go, hey, 60% chance, I'll plan my picnic. We were listening, the SpaceX launch director, Mike Taylor, was talking to the launch weather officer asking about the 3 criteria that scrubbed us today. It sounds like in another minute or two, the Lightning and the attached anvil cloud rules will clear. The field mill rule, charge in the atmosphere, is still bouncing around, and so, hey, we may need several more minutes before that one would clear. So we'd need even longer than 10 minutes in the window today, it looks like, for all the rules to clear. That brings up what I wanted to mention a little while ago. I got lost listening to the weather brief. But there are a lot of folks who are going, why an instantaneous launch window for Falcon 9 and Dragon? Now, typically when we go to the space station, when we do the mission planning, it's an instantaneous window. There may be enough performance in the rocket to launch somewhere in a 5-minute period, but you've got to pick a time in there. But in the case of Falcon 9, once we start propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, it doesn't matter so much if you can move 5 or 10 minutes left or right, because the whole sequence is scripted. We do the flight analysis assuming that the temperatures of the propellants are below a certain amount so that we know how much performance is available to the rocket, how much margin we're going to have. So essentially, if you start the countdown, 4 hours, 8 hours out like we were doing today, and you have a very short window, once you get into propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes, you have to go as soon as you get to 0. We don't have the ability to stop the countdown, wait 5 minutes. Now all all of a sudden the liquid oxygen starts warming up from 340 degrees below zero in the ground system, and that changes how much performance you get carrying into orbit, and we don't want to cut into those margins. Now, if we had had something like a 4-hour window, which some communication satellites have, we could actually get down to almost zero, hold the count, detank the Falcon 9, wait a while, it takes us about an hour and a half, reload a whole new batch of cold liquid oxygen and fuel from the big storage tank that we've got there at Pad 39A, and try to launch again. But in that case, you have to be able to launch, about an hour and a half or so later after you scrub. And in the case of the International Space Station, an hour and a half from now, it's nowhere near where we need to be to get to orbit with the performance of the Falcon 9 and the Dragon. So today, it's a combination. We start the day with a 1-second window.
Yeah, just informing you, it's
but
been
once
2
we
hours,
get
30
inside
minutes
of 35 minutes, it becomes an instantaneous window for the Falcon 9, regardless of what the customer may be able to give us. So there's a little explanation for folks who are wondering why we have such a tight window.
Okay,
Right now, it looks like we are bringing the
so,
last bits of fuel off of the
say
stage, and liquid oxygen is just about off of the stage.
Stuff,
So things are clocking right along per the 40-minute timeline. Everything looks good, and we'll wait to hear that we're clear, and then when we get the call for Bob and Doug to go ahead and disarm launch escape system, and the crew access arm will come back out, center itself around the Dragon hatch, and then the ingress team will go up there and open the hatch.
Thank you for the science lesson, John I.
Hey, no charge.
Much appreciated.
We did hear a quick call to the crew there. We should be just under 10 minutes away from that prop offload completing. It looks like we're just tracking
Stage 2
the
fuel
RP1
offload is complete.
And there we have the confirmation. Stage 2 offload's complete. And we should have now just the RP1, so that densified propellant, or the RP1 is kerosene. We should be under 10%, a little under 10 minutes until that's off. And then we'll step through those events we were discussing, where they'll be able to disarm the launch escape system, get the arm back out there, and Bob and Doug can begin to exit the Dragon spacecraft. Still not the friendliest skies in the background.
That is Florida, though. The weather is constantly changing over there, which is why we always have to keep an eye on it through every single launch that we have out there. Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. As you can see, that is a live view of them on the Crew Dragon vehicle as they're waiting prop offload to complete. Second stage prop offload is complete. We are just waiting on first stage to complete.
Stage 1 LOX offload is complete. Waiting on stage 1 fuel, roughly 5 minutes or so.
And again, the launch escape system is still armed. We are waiting for a prop offload to complete before they disarm that, and then they will be able to egress from the Crew Dragon vehicle.
And we just heard we should be just under 5 minutes away from the last of that fuel coming out of the Falcon 9 first stage. And then we'll see those events start to pick back up, and we'll see the crew arm swing back out. They've been in those seats for a couple hours now. They typically get inside of Dragon a little over 2.5 hours ahead of launch. So they've been strapped into these seats for quite a while. They are custom sized though, so they're as comfortable and as snug as possible. Obviously, since they're going to be in them for a really long time, but most importantly, when you're doing that splashdown at the very end of the mission, it's your car seat, and splashing down or landing on land is not the most gentle of procedures in a capsule. So just really making sure that they're snug inside of that Dragon capsule. But we should be a little under 5 minutes away from the prop offload being completed.
And as Dan mentioned, those suits are custom made, but the seats are also custom fit for each astronaut as well. They do remain on Crew Dragon for this mission for almost 24 hours about. So we do want to make sure that they are comfortable and make sure that the suits and the seats are comfortable enough for them to stay in that position for a while. I believe when they get into orbit, they are allowed to get out of their seats and get a little bit more comfortable, but it's a long ride for them.
Yeah, once they do get on orbit, they are able to get out of the seats and actually out of their suits too, since for this flight path today, it was going to take them about 19 hours. So Bob and Doug would actually have had about 8 hours to sleep on board the Dragon capsule. So we weren't able to launch today, though. The rendezvous on Saturday should be very similar to what we would have had if we launched today, where it'll take them about 19 hours to get to the International Space Station. So they'll launch and they'll have a number of different events that we'll be able to walk you through, including manual piloting of Dragon and just really putting the spacecraft through all of the paces before it arrives at the International Space Station. Because again, this is a test flight, and this is this last test before we certify the Dragon spacecraft for regular crewed flights, which will just be bringing up those long duration, 6-month, maybe even a year-long missions.
Right. And it should be a very exciting test flight because it's pretty much like an actual mission. When Bob and Doug get on the station, they will be performing some research while they're up there and performing tests and doing some final things for this demonstration mission.
Yeah, but I mean, just for right now, we are just going to continue to stay with them until we see them come out of Dragon, because the launch escape system's still armed while we wait for this propellant offload to complete. That's just done as a safety measure. Anytime you have rocket propellants beneath you, you want to make sure that we have a good way for them to get out of the way. And so we should be within just a couple of minutes for that final bit of RP1 coming off the first stage, and then we'll hear the crew get the go to disarm that launch escape system. We'll see the crew access arm swing back in. But if you're just tuning in, expecting them to be in space, we did have a scrub today due to weather. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time. And just like we did today, we're going to be bringing you every single step of the way. It's going to look a little familiar if you watched all of today's, but it's going to be just as exciting.
I could imagine it might even be more exciting with all the anticipation that we've hyped this launch up for with already going through it all today. But again, the more practice we have, the better off we will be. Hopefully next launch attempt we will have a flawless launch and actually be able to lift off with good weather.
Yeah, weather is going to be the big thing that we'll continue to watch. That was the culprit today for our scrub. And our initial weather reports already looking at about a 40% probability of violation. So as John and I was saying, the optimists in us have to say that's 60% good. So we're going to look at the good side of this, and that's roughly what we were in the days leading up to this. We won't have a rogue tropical storm forming off of South Carolina on us on Saturday, but Florida weather will always be dynamic, so we'll just continue to track and hopefully get a good chance hit that window on Saturday.
And just a reminder, everything else on the vehicle and for the mission was looking good today. It was just the weather, which, as John I said earlier, and Lauren even referred to him mentioning this, weather is the one thing that we actually cannot control on our missions. So unfortunately, it did cause us to scrub today, but the vehicles are healthy. Bob and Doug were ready. And they should be ready to go again with the next launch attempt on Saturday.
Just looking at our data, it looks like that RP1 is just about all out. So we'll just kind of stand by for a few more moments. Hopefully we get that call soon, John and I.
Yeah, I was going to, while we're waiting to hear the call, that the last percentage of fuel is off. I was going to comment on Jesse's discussion about it was just the weather. I think during this countdown, there were more words said about the weather than everything else.
Uh-huh.
I'm listening right now to a weather discussion in the background.
Yeah, and again, for people wondering if we knew that we did have
Stage
bad
one
weather,
fuel
you know,
off
even from
vehicle,
this
waiting
morning.
close out of the
Again, we
offload
do
team.
monitor this all the way down to the final minutes of the countdown. And with Florida weather being pretty sporadic, sometimes we have even hurricanes coming through or bad weather coming through and passing 20 minutes later and having good weather for a launch. So this is why we continued to attempt to launch today, but unfortunately 4T0 today, weather was not on our side.
Yeah, and Jesse, this is John again. I dropped off to listen to a weather discussion. They were just giving the times. The lightning rule went green, so we could have gone without a lightning concern. The attached anvil rule cleared, but the field mill rule is expected to clear at 58 minutes after the hour. So that's another 4.5 minutes from now. So we were close, but we needed about 25 minutes later launch time. It does remind me, at risk of offending some people, but the old saying that says it's better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than flying wishing you were on the ground.
Yes, definitely. Safety first, always, and making sure that when Bob and Doug do fly, they are flying safely and as planned. So again, this is standard procedure for us to make sure that they do have a safe flight to the International Space Station.
All right, well, for now, we're just continuing to stand by, expecting the call that all of that prop has now been offloaded from Falcon 9.
All right, venting vehicle tanks to nominal TPC set points for crew ingress.
At this moment, the launch escape system still armed. Once the prop offload is complete, that'll be the next step in our procedures to have Bob and Doug begin to make their way out of Dragon.
LD, countdown 1.
LD.
We have the prompt here for nominal crew egress.
Okay, so we're ready for launch escape system disarm.
As affirmed, ready for launch escape disarm.
MD copies. You guys are ready?
Yeah, launch team's ready. Go ahead and advise the crew.
Hey, Dragon SpaceX, you copied that discussion. So with that, you are go for disarming launch escape system per section 2 of 5.100.
We'll put that in work. Section 2, disarming the launch escape system.
All right, that was the call we were waiting for, propelling off of Falcon 9. So Doug Hurley, Bob Ankin now going to disarm the launch escape system on Dragon. And once that's disarmed, those 8 Super Draco engines will be out of the mix.
SpaceX Dragon launch escape system has been disarmed into Alpha Decimal 3.
Copy that. We concur.
And showing then confirmed the launch escape system has been disarmed.
And Dragon SpaceX, with that confirmation, you are go to open your visors and proceed to section 3.
Okay, we'll open the visors and go to section 3.
As you heard and you can see, Bob and Doug can now open their visors and get ready for exiting the vehicle. Again, they kept their visors on while the launch escape system was armed, while prop offloading was continuing, and that is just to make sure that they are safe. Now that there is no more propellant on any of the vehicles, they are safe to have disarmed the launch escape system and now are getting ready for that crew arm to swing back the hatch to open and for them to egress.
SpaceX Dragon with an update. We're holding in 3.4 and we're ready for seat rotation when you are.
Copy that. We'll wait for the closeout team to open the hatch and verify clearance, and then we can execute seat rotation.
Dragon Cap.
And there's that crew arm swinging back towards Dragon. Once that crew arm is in place, they will be able to open the hatch on Crew Dragon. Bob and Doug's seats will rotate back out of launch position so that they can safely get out of their seats and egress the vehicle.
And we heard they'll have what they call nominal egress, so just the normal procedures for getting them out of the capsule. That means the same closeout team that was there to get them in will be able to assist as they come out. They'll arrive and get that hatch open, and then they'll be able to rotate the seats. That'll rotate Bob and Doug pretty much forward, where they'll be in the original position that the seats were configured when they made their way into Dragon. It just gets them a little bit out and under the displays and makes getting in and out of the capsule a little bit easier. They've been in those seats for about 3 hours at this point, so definitely a long day for the crew. As they woke up about 6 hours prior to our T-0, had their breakfast, which we confirmed was steak and eggs, at least for Doug Hurley. And then they proceeded through all of the suit up and the trip to the pad, making their way inside Dragon, where they've been for about the last 3 hours at this point. We were on track for an on-time liftoff right at 4:33 p.m. Eastern time, but did have to scrub a little under 17 minutes before launch due to weather. So for now, we've offloaded all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed. That crew access arm is back right up next to Dragon, as you can see in that view on the left. Pretty soon we'll see the teams arrive to get the hatch open, get Bob and Doug out, and they'll make their way back to crew quarters and their quarantine. It is important to note that throughout the entire process of them getting into Dragon, suiting up all of those different steps, they maintain that same quarantine that they've been in since for about 2 weeks now, and that is specifically for events like today, where we have to scrub and just go to another day. So we don't want to break that quarantine once we're putting them into that launch vehicle. And that's a standard quarantine that we have for any crew members flying to the International Space Station. The current COVID-19 pandemic obviously puts a little bit of extra pressure and a little bit of an extra spotlight on that, but they're following a lot of the same procedures that we have in place just to keep crew members healthy before they go and spend several months in space in an enclosed environment with just a couple of other people.
Right, and it's a little bit more difficult to get them help on the space station, right? So we want to make sure that when they do head up to the space station, that they are fully healthy. So this, again, is standard procedure, not just because of this pandemic that's going on. This is a standard procedure for astronauts to quarantine prior to heading to the station. And as Dan mentioned, this is a standard procedure to exit the vehicle as well. We did scrub today, but this is not an emergency state. This is standard procedure. This is something that is practiced and rehearsed and made sure that we do follow our standard procedures to make sure that everything is still safe. Bob and Doug exit safely and go back into quarantine and get ready for our next launch attempt.
Looks like they're getting a chance to stretch their legs, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dan, Jesse, I'm monitoring along in the scrub procedure right now. They're getting the goes to get the folks back to the pad, the crew that'll open the hatch. So they have notified the team chief, launch engineering, to return to the pad. As a reminder, around the pad, the Air Force and NASA set up roadblocks to make sure nobody gets into the hazard area. So they will head to the roadblocks, they'll pull them open so that they can drive to the pad. So launch director, I think, is estimating it's still about 15 minutes for the crew to drive all the way down out to 39A, get up the tower, and then begin operations on the hatch. They have confirmed that the purge of the Dragon service section, which is nitrogen during the countdown to avoid an oxygen leak, that is back on air now. The crew access arm is on air, so they're ready for the egress team to get up into the tower. but it's going to take them a little bit still, I think, to drive down the road in the vehicles and go up the elevator. But everything continuing to run per a normal scrub countdown, which we have had the opportunity to practice with the crew in, for example, the dry dress rehearsal last Saturday after we had done the static fire of the Falcon 9 the day before.
I've been seeing a few questions, people asking why aren't we just trying to launch tomorrow? As John and I was talking us through, there's some very specific times you have to identify when you're going to be able to link up with the International Space Station. You only have so much fuel, which can only generate so much energy to make sure you're going to intersect with the station, which is flying at over 17,000 miles an hour. So you're hitting one bullet with another bullet. Some of our other launch attempts are able to make it to station, but have much longer times.
To prevent us from losing comms, we're going to be switching to umbilical at this time. I'm going to be unmerging Countdown 1, but we'll keep you updated here on Dragon Ground.
Okay, yeah, we see the TDRS countdown with a little over 3 minutes. We'll stand by for your next call on umbilical.
Copy.
The crew getting a call, they're just going to reconfigure some communications. But as to why we're not launching, say, tomorrow...
And core and Countdown 1 loops are merged.
But when we pick our launch attempts, we also have to take in mind some of the human factors of these attempts. Some of these other launch attempts may exist, but it would require Dragon taking in excess of 30 or more hours potentially to reach the station, which could wreak some havoc with the sleep shift cycles, not only for Bob and Doug, but also for the crew on board station that has to line up their sleep schedule with Bob and Doug as they arrive. And the crews on station and Bob and Doug will be operating off of Greenwich Mean Time once they get there.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check umbilical.
SpaceX Dragon, loud and clear on umbilical.
Copy, have you the same.
Still getting good comm between the crew and the core here in Hawthorne. But really, just to sum it up, we pick our launch attempts for a number of reasons, not just can we make it to the station, but just how long is it going to take to get there. And that's why Saturday is going to be our best option. We're going to be targeting that one at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time for our next attempt. And it'll be a little over 19, maybe a little over 20 hours until we actually arrive at the space station, if we're able to get off the ground on Saturday.
And this gives Bob and Doug, a few days to kind of shake off the nerves from today's launch attempt, give them some more time to rest, and again, get ready for our launch attempt on Saturday. And if you're just now joining us, we did scrub our Demonstration 2 mission today. And as John mentioned, we are waiting for the egress team to make it back to the launch pad, head up the tower, and help the crew, or help Bob and Doug egress the vehicle.
Dragon SpaceX for closeout team status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team has arrived at the pad and they are proceeding to the White Room.
Copy that.
You heard that call out. The egress team is at the pad and are proceeding to meet Bob and Doug in the White Room, where they can open the hatch and help them exit the vehicle.
open. We'll continue to stick with Bob and Doug until we see that hatch get open and them start to make their way out. And then they're going to, oh, and there we can get some views once more back at the pad. You can see that egress team moving back in. They were wearing the black clean suits that we saw as they were helping Bob and Doug get into the Dragon just several hours ago. They're now going to get on the elevator, make their way back up, down the crew access arm, and then we'll get that Dragon side hatch opened.
And as we saw earlier, this is a very tall structure, but that elevator is pretty quick there. So we saw them enter the bottom of the tower. It should be a very short time before they make it to the top and are able to get to the White Room and open the hatch for Bob and Doug.
If you want.
And should just be a few more moments. We'll see that closeout team make their way back into the crew access arm and down the hatchway. And again, if you are just now tuning in, we did have that scrub just about a little under 17 minutes before launch. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th. At launch time is going to be another instantaneous launch time. It's going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time over there in Florida. And assuming an on-time launch, it'll be a pretty similar flight that we were looking at today, where it'll be roughly about 19 hours before they make that initial contact to the International Space Station. They'll get on orbit and execute a series of 5 different burns to gradually raise their orbit until they're just a few hundred meters below the station and maybe a few kilometers behind. And then they'll do all of the final approach initiation maneuvers. And by that point, the team here in Hawthorne will be working very closely with the team down in Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Weather for Saturday still not ideal, but it's roughly what we started out with today, where we have about a 40% chance, possibility of violation, and it'll be tracking a lot of the same issues with cumulus clouds and potential precipitation. We'll also be keeping an eye on all of the downrange weather. Oh, it looks like we're seeing some people start to make their way into the crew access arm now, so we should see them get that Dragon side hatch open in just a few minutes. But as a reminder, we'll be looking at weather around the launch pad and weather downrange in their flight path on the way to orbit, and that's always checked just in case they have to do any kind of emergency maneuver and land down in the Atlantic Ocean. We will be making sure that the weather is at acceptable levels all the way until they're into space. So you can see the team coming down now. Should see the hatch open momentarily, and then we can begin to get Bob and Doug out of the Dragon spacecraft.
And again, we are staying live until Bob and Doug are safely out of Crew Dragon. You can see on your left-hand screen the team getting ready to open the hatch for them and help them out of their seats.
And at this point, the launch escape system has been disarmed. That was done after we successfully offloaded all of the propellants from the first and second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. There are propellants loaded into Dragon, so the teams look like they were just doing what we call kind of a sniff test, so using a portable detector just to assess the atmosphere around the Dragon capsule itself before they get the hatch open and bring Bob and Doug out.
All of this is standard safety procedures for egressing the vehicle. This is to ensure the safety of the crew, as well as Bob and Doug.
Dragon, SpaceX for status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team is at the White Room. They are configuring the crew arm for egress, expected to take no earlier than 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. Thank you.
It should be just about 10 minutes. As a reminder, they're in the White Room. We walked through that a little bit earlier in our coverage this morning. The White Room name simply because of its color, and that's something that started all the way back during earlier Gemini missions. And that is literally the last place on planet Earth where astronauts are standing before they get loaded into this vehicle. It has an environmental control apparatus and a seal that it can put right up against the Dragon spacecraft just to keep all of that dust, dirt, and Florida humidity
And Dragon
out of the
SpaceX,
capsule.
we're right at 3 hours in seat rotation. I just wanted to check in with you on comfort levels.
I'd say no changes, Jay. It hasn't been too bad at all.
Copy all.
And obviously at this point, with the launch escape system disarmed, we have loosened up straps and gotten our feet out of the straps on the bottom of the seat, so it's a little more comfortable anyway.
Copy all. Looks comfortable.
Right now, the closeout team just going to take a couple of minutes to configure the White Room. They'll set up a seal between it and the Dragon spacecraft just to make sure we're not letting anything from the surrounding environment get into that spacecraft, which is kept very pristine, obviously, for the crew members once they're inside. They have a small bridge that just connects the crew arm to the capsule itself. Just making sure they have a nice clear path for their entrance and exit from the spacecraft. So it should just be a few more minutes. We'll see that hatch get opened, and then our crew members can start to make their way out. And you heard seat rotation. They rotate the seats prior to their actual flight to where they're a little bit more parallel to the ground, and that just puts them directly in front of those displays. We'll see them rotate down, just giving them easy access to get out of the capsule.
And as Dan mentioned, we want to keep FOD out of the capsule. FOD is foreign object debris, so that's basically anything that does not belong inside of the vehicle. So not just like dirt and dust, but just anything that was not meant to be inside of there should not be there. So we are doing everything as a standard procedure to make sure that we do keep FOD out, especially since this is going to be another attempt and another opportunity for FOD to enter the vehicle. As they're exiting, we still make sure that we keep everything basically like a clean room.
In Dragon SpaceX, you may hear some vehicle venting in about 20 seconds.
Copy.
John Isberger here with the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We are continuing to wait for the crew to open the side hatch. We've got the camera showing astronauts Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken inside. Visors are up. They've gotten their feet out of the restraints. Gloves are off in case of Doug, it looks like. And the team is just outside the hatch. They're going through the sequence right now, make sure pressure checks are all good, make sure there are no concerns with gases, be it the propellants of the vehicle or just nitrogen gas that we use as a purge. Currently we are coming up on about 50 minutes after the planned T0. To just reiterate what Dan and Jesse have been talking about earlier, we had a good countdown. I had a lot of fun saying there were no issues on Falcon 9 or Dragon of a technical sort. The range was ready to support. The downrange weather looked good in case Dragon had to make a unplanned abort splashdown in an escape maneuver somewhere in the Atlantic. And we even had the, once we get on orbit, in case Dragon had to re-enter and come back early, the weather was good in the Pacific in case it had to come down. So everything was looking our way except Mother Nature, the weather. It's Florida, and we got into the back end of the tropical storm that has now gone ashore in the Carolinas. But unfortunately, that left everything disrupted just enough to where we violated several of the weather rules, and we did not have enough time for them to go green. Green meaning where the range says conditions are clear and you are all right to launch. We were still red on those rules, and that was the end of the countdown for the day. Again, we scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. That was shortly before we were due to begin loading the liquid oxygen onto the second stage. That was both the logical breakpoint in the countdown procedure where we could take a scrub without loading one more propellant on the vehicle. And at the same time, that was when the range gave us the final bad news that we weren't going to get green conditions before the clock ran out of T0. So continuing to watch right now as the crew works to get the hatch open. They send final commands, making sure that everything's go. Once the hatch is open, the ground crew can verify that there's nothing in the way under the seats that Doug and Bob are sitting in, and we will get a seat rotation again, get them back a little bit more vertical. They're more on their backs right now in the launch position, so they'll rotate, then they'll help them out of the seats, and they'll come back out and down the arm and off of the tower.
Dragon SpaceX, for status, it looks like the closeout team is inflating the hatch CO, the arm CO right now.
Okay, yeah, we can see some folks outside the window.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we've been quiet for a few minutes, but if you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have to scrub today's mission due to weather. We were just under 17 minutes away from our T0 time at 4:33 Eastern when the call was made. We were still in violation of a few of the weather constraints that just are really there to inform teams when it's safe to launch. So we're looking at weather both around the pad and weather all the way on the way to orbit for them. So we did have to scrub. Since then, we've been able to get all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed. And right now, the closeout teams are there in the white room, so right at the end of that crew access arm. They're configuring the big seal that goes around the Dragon capsule just to make sure its environment is isolated from all that nasty Florida weather. And then they'll be able to get the hatch open, and we'll get Bob and Doug back out.
Well, we're coming up on just under an hour since the planned T0. Again, if you're just joining us, well, we've been here summing up for a while.
Dragon, SpaceX for status.
Yep, stand by for status check.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, closeout team's still working to do the hatch seal inflation. Expect another 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. We scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. We violated 3 weather rules. The weather rules finally cleared up, but it was long after the planned T0. The SpaceX egress team did return to the pad. They were sent through the roadblocks that surround the pad, demarcating where the hazard area is. Team's up on the crew arm, and as you just heard, SpaceX talking to astronauts Bob and Doug. They're working the seal around Dragon. Then we make sure that Dragon capsule pressure is equalized with the crew arm, and then we'll go into the hatch opening sequence. So we've still got several more minutes. We'll carry that as we go. A couple of points to bring up. Once the crew comes off of the Dragon and comes back down, goes back to the crew quarters to de-suit, we will be
Dragon,
leaving.
SpaceX for awareness. We're going to command the vehicle into pad hatch open in preparation for hatch opening.
Copy that.
Okay, that's good. That'll get them into the sequence to make sure that the pressures inside and outside
And
are
note
equal.
this will equalize cabin pressure, so you may notice something there.
Okay, thanks.
So as I started to mention, once everybody's off, we'll leave the Falcon 9 Dragon, the crew arm, where they are. That is in the launch support position. There's no plan to come back down to horizontal. The vehicle is designed to stay vertical. Now, if we were to find something wrong during the countdown as we go through data review, that could mean that we have to come horizontal, as we did late last night, early this morning, as we were working a ground issue on the transporter erector, and then we went right back up. But currently, no plans to come horizontal. We'll stay vertical up to the next launch attempt on Saturday. There will also be, as is typical, engineers will go through all of the data they collected today, and then there will be a report out in what's called a Delta Launch Readiness Review, probably this Friday before we get into the next launch attempt on Saturday. That's where the engineering disciplines will brief management, chief engineer, launch director, mission director, the NASA customer, where we stand on today's countdown, what we learned, as well as our readiness to proceed into another countdown attempt. But currently at Kennedy Space Center at historic Pad 39A, we're getting ready for the hatch opening and the crew to be able to leave Dragon, come back down, get out of their suits, and wait to go another day, hopefully this coming Saturday, the 30th.
And Dragon SpaceX, sure you see the vehicles in pad hatch open. The AVVs are now open, and that nitrox injection is complete.
Yep, we felt it and heard it, and copy all.
And Dragon SpaceX for status, the closeout team is stepping into hatch opening now.
Copy.
John Innsbrucker back here at the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We've got another camera up, and you can see the side-by-side view on the monitor. Astronauts Bob and Doug inside, waiting for the hatch to come open. We're still in the middle of a equalization step. Make sure that pressure inside the Dragon is equal to the ambient pressure, so that when we open the hatch, without any extra force. You can also see the SpaceX team is up alongside the capsule. They are removing essentially the thermal protection devices. You know, for example, if you have a door handle on your automobile, if you're going to have to re-enter from outer space, you're going to have to put a small heat shield over that door handle. Otherwise, any kind of protuberances, cavities could be subject to burn-up. So they have to take their time, make sure that we get all of the thermal protection safety devices off, so that they can then get access to the mechanism to go ahead and bring the hatch open. So what you are watching right now on the left monitor is the egress team going through the steps. This is typical. We're not hearing any chatter over the pad net that they're having any problems. They just take their time and make sure that everybody's ready to bring the hatch open when they finally get there. So currently we are T plus 1 hour and 11 minutes or so since the planned launch. Obviously, we're still on the ground as we're going through the post-scrub operations to bring astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken out of the capsule. And you can see now hatch is coming open. There's a view from the camera inside the capsule. You can see the hatch area. Crew gave a quick wave to the ground crew when it came open. And right now they should be inspecting the area underneath the seats so that we can command the seats to rotate back into the ingress-egress position, make it a little easier on Bob and Doug to get in and out of the seats.
Dragon SpaceX, just for awareness, they have a few more steps in their procedure, and they should be calling to us for seat rotation shortly.
Okay, copy that. Yep, we see them working on that, and just as a lead into that, we are ready for the seat rotation. So just let us know when you're ready to start.
We'll go.
We have the confirmation from the Dragon team talking to the astronauts that they are just about ready to send the seat rotation command. Again, the ground crew is verifying, making sure that none of the cargo that's packed in Dragon underneath the crew, nothing is in the way, nothing came loose. You're looking at one row of crew seating, but there is, as we've mentioned before, Dragon's designed to carry up to 7, but on this flight, for example, much of the cargo that we're carrying is loaded in various areas down below where the astronauts are seated. So they're just verifying nothing's in the way so that when they send the rotation command, the seats will pivot without encumbrance.
Dragon SpaceX, we are initiating seat rotation.
Dragon copies, we're ready.
That call out from the Dragon Core up to the crew, letting them know that we are sending the commands from the ground to rotate the seats, and you can see astronauts Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken rotating in their seat back to a more comfortable position to get in and out of the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, seats are upright. Thanks for the valiant effort today, helping us test our scrub timeline, and we'll see you Saturday.
Yeah, we appreciate those words. Everybody did great today. It was a great practice, and we'll do it again on Saturday. Everybody stay safe, and we'll talk to you on the loops.
Likewise.
Well, Dan, we've heard it. They've got rotated. The hatch is open. The ground crew is going to work to get the astronauts out. The SpaceX Dragon team, like the SpaceX Falcon 9 team, is going to be coming off of console now as we turn it over to the folks on the pad. So while we didn't launch, it was a pretty good countdown and scrub sequence. So we've got that good lesson learned under our belt. We look forward to Saturday having even better results when we get close to T0.
That's right. Always great when we don't have any issues with the capsule or the rocket, which we didn't today. Just had to fight that weather. And we'll be doing the same on Saturday. We are looking at about a 50% probability of violation. That's about where we were today. We did see it was all just a matter of trying to line up correctly. And didn't make it today, but we're going to try again on Saturday.
Right, and it sounds like we were just about half an hour away from making the launch attempt today with weather, with 50% weather chance on Saturday. Hopefully we have a better day at T0 for liftoff.
But we're definitely going to all be back. Jesse, myself, and John I will be here in Hawthorne to take you along every step of the way. We hope everyone else tunes in also, because this is really going to be a monumental moment. We're now going to look towards Saturday for America once again launching U.S. astronauts on American rockets from American soil. With them getting out of the capsule, though, that's going to do it for us here at Hawthorne. We're going to send you back down to Florida for one last check-in with our teams there. So over to you, Marie, Lauren, Leland, if you're still sticking around, and we're going to be looking forward to Saturday.
All right, thanks a lot, Dan. Yeah, we're just all sitting here. We watched Bob Behnken just climb out of his seat. Looks like he is out of Crew Dragon now, and Doug Hurley following suit. No pun intended. There we see Bob in the foreground and Doug climbing out of Crew Dragon in the background. Pad closeout team looks like helping them out. So any minute they're going to be basically just reversing course, coming back the way from whence they came. Leland, I know you had a scrub years back.
Yeah, Marie, in 2008, we were having breakfast. I never scrubbed while I was in the vehicle, but we were having breakfast, and we got a call from the flight director saying that we had these engine cutoff sensors that were bad. 2 were bad, and the flight rules say that you should have to have 3 of 4 to fly. And so we all said we're not going to fly unless we have them. And I think we all need to know that the flight rules are there to protect, our astronauts and their families. And we got very close today. We sometimes get that launch fever that we want to go ahead and just try it anyway. But we have these rules for a reason, and it's really important to stick to the rules, even in the heat of battle, even with dignitaries here. It's just the way that we have to do it as operators.
It's also a good wet dress exercise. Went through, exercised all the systems nearly to T0, which is incredible. I believe this may have been the first time Bob and Doug are sitting on top of in our vehicle with a fueled rocket. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Closing the hatch, exercising the environmental life support systems, doing that flight leak check. I mean, all of this is a ton of learning that came out of here, even if we didn't ultimately go to space today.
Absolutely. So we're getting a cool view that we wouldn't have seen if they'd launched. They're making their way back down the crew access arm. And they are going to be turning the corner there, heading to the stairs that are going to take them down to the elevator.
Passing the worm.
Passing the worm. So, yep, they're heading down the stairs now. It's going to take them down to the 255-foot level, and then they're going to be getting in the elevator, take them down to the ground level. And we'll do it again on Saturday.
It's actually very reassuring that all systems were go. You know, there was no problems with the vehicle at all, as Lauren, as you said, and it was just some weather. And I think if we have that same performance on Saturday, and the weather gods give us some good juju there, we'll be good to go.
Yes, yes, please. I mean, we were so close today. It hurt my heart. If we had 10 more minutes, it sounded like we probably would have made it, but just was not to be today. And of course, we're going to always do what is the safest thing for the crew. And as they head into the elevator there, we do want to go over to Operations and Support Building 2 now, where the NASA Administrator, Jim Bridenstine, is standing by. He would like to provide his own thoughts now. We'll go to him.
Well, thank you, Marie. I know there's a lot of disappointment today. The weather got us. But I also want to say it was a great day for NASA. It was a great day for SpaceX. I think our teams worked together in a really impressive way, making good decisions all along. So here in this particular case, we had just simply too much electricity in the atmosphere. There wasn't really a lightning storm or anything like that, but there was a concern that if we did launch, it could actually trigger lightning. And so we made the right decision. We had the parameters set ahead of time, the teams worked together, and in the end, the right decision was made. I will tell you, I've done a lot of interviews over the last 2 days, and in those interviews, I get asked over and over again, is there undue pressure here? People say to me, with all of the attention of the world on this launch, with all of the VIPs coming, are you going to feel pressure on this launch? And I will tell you, as I've told our teams, under no circumstances should anybody feel pressure. If we are not ready to go, we simply do not go. And I will tell you, I am proud, so proud of our teams working together to make the right decision in this particular case. We have a lot to look forward to in just a few short days. On Saturday afternoon, we're going to do it again. Here's what we know. We are going to launch American astronauts on American rockets from American soil. We're going to do that. We're very close. I also want to say that this was an important milestone just today. We did a wet dress rehearsal. We haven't done a wet dress rehearsal with our astronauts full gear before. We've done a dry dress rehearsal. Now we've done a wet dress. So we learn a lot every time we do these things. This is no different. And we get a lot of great data from doing what we just did. So today was a good day for NASA. It was a good day for SpaceX. And we've got a lot to look forward to. So I want to say congratulations to both of the teams. And let's go get this done. I know we're up for it. Saturday is going to be a great day. And here we go again. So thank you to everybody for all the great work. Marie, back to you.
All right, thank you so much. Those were some great insights from Jim Bridenstine, the NASA administrator. The crew's making their way back to astronaut crew quarters, where they're going to remain in quarantine until Saturday. They've been in quarantine for 2 weeks, and there they will stay to keep them safe and healthy for our next launch attempt. Again, we had to stand down from launch today because of unfavorable weather conditions around Launch Complex 39A. But we're going to be ready to do this again Saturday, May 30th. The new launch time will be 3:22 p.m. And our coverage will begin live here on NASA TV at 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, Saturday. So be sure to tune back in on NASA television and nasa.gov/live if you're watching along online. And we will be back here to take you through it every step of the way. Thanks for sticking with us, and we will see you back here Saturday.